Welcome into the Tech Ed podcast. What do 600,000 job openings in manufacturing mean for the world of manufacturing? How do we get more women excited about careers in manufacturing and give them great career pathways to become leaders in the great world of advanced manufacturing? Why is it that manufacturing companies struggle so much at marketing themselves to the next generation of workforce talent? We are going to cover all of these and other topics today with our guest, Mariana Cogan, the Chief Marketing Officer of Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence. And Mariana, so awesome to have you with us here at the Tech Ed Podcast.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be here. I love the opportunity to be able to talk with you today.
Well, and as we were warming up and just learning a little bit about your background, you've lived all over the world. You're doing some really important work on the marketing side with a company. I think most of the folks that are involved in manufacturing recognize the brand Hexagon, right? You're ubiquitous $6 billion company, but we're going to learn more for anybody that isn't familiar with Hexagon. But I want to start out with this. I know you spent so much time, Mariana, thinking about the talent gap in manufacturing, the fact that we've got all these amazing career opportunities, 600,000 plus of them, and we're not always attracting the right people to manufacturing, at least enough of them. So what does this situation look like for someone that spends their time in and around manufacturing trying to get people excited about these careers?
It is definitely an interesting challenge because, as you just mentioned, we have 600,000 openings in the industry. And at the same time, we have close to 3 million women out there without a job.
Wow.
If we could just match those two, we will be able to get rid of one of the biggest struggles in the industry, which is that workforce gap that we're currently facing.
It is really quick math, right? I mean, you've got all of these women that could solve for, a huge part, if not all, of the talent gap. When women are unemployed, they're obviously they're not in the workforce. How do you look at that in terms of approaching that opportunity for the manufacturing sector, right? So we recognize the opportunities there, but how do we capitalize on that opportunity?
There are a lot of things that need to be done. I think number one is, the industry, the manufacturing industry. We really need to spend more time, more money, more effort on a branding that shows that manufacturing is not anymore that heavy lifting.
Okay.
That it really needed to have that, male power to be able to get involved in manufacturing. By now, with smart manufacturing, there's so many jobs that are so different than what the old idea it was. It's really on the branding side. And then really the companies, really making sure that we get more women through the doors, that we give them visibility, that we give flexibility. It's a lot of women that are going to be raising a family. If we give this visibility, flexibility, and that reshaping of the branding, I think that there's a lot that we can do.
Sure. So let me ask you this. I think about people working in other sectors. Let's say I'm working in consulting or I'm working in education or whatever. Maybe some of those might lend themselves a little bit more to flexibility than others. Then you get into manufacturing, of course, where you've got production lines running. You've got to make sure that those are fully staffed. We can't just tell somebody, hey, you don't have to come to work tomorrow, because you do that too many times. All of a sudden, you don't have enough people to backfill on the manufacturing line. What kind of things are you seeing on the part of manufacturers in terms of trying to address the flexibility that the modern workforce is looking for?
Well, that's another area that it's important that we address, that there's different types of jobs that are out there from a manufacturing perspective. We definitely have, people who've been, studying engineering and they've been in the space for a long time. We have the woman that can be on the floor, as you mentioned, but there's also all these other jobs that happen, around the industry, from manufacturing, from, marketing. There's different components where you can find plenty of flexibility,
right,
to be able to address more, as you know extremely well. A lot of the manufacturing happens in smaller companies that are everywhere, where you can find, different combinations that address the flexibility that is needed.
Absolutely. And with more smart manufacturing today, and then you think about the different careers, a lot of times when people think about careers in manufacturing, you think about a career, maybe working in assembly or working in production or working in, welding or paint or powder or quality or what have you. And those are all great opportunities, but we also have jobs in accounting, we have jobs in marketing, we have jobs in production planning, scheduling, logistics, distribution, all of these different aspects of manufacturing. I'm interested in this. A lot of times when we think about a company focusing on workforce and focusing on bringing people into an organization, getting people excited about manufacturing careers, you almost think about that as being a human resource function. But here you are, the chief marketing officer of this really ubiquitous company. Tell me a little bit about that connection. Why does Hexagon look at this as a marketing function and not just an HR function?
I think it's a change that we see all across everything that we do. I think a few minutes ago, we were just talking about executives, getting active on LinkedIn and social media. Maybe in the old days, you would have said, well, that's the PR department.
Mm-hmm.
But now really being able to create that authenticity, that connection with the people, it's really everybody's job. And in my case, being, female, Latin, I represent a very small percentage of the population in the industry.
Sure.
So it's more my obligation. I see it as part of the things that I have to do for, paying forward to take an active role. And the same happens with everybody at Hexagon.
I love that. And you're incredibly relatable, I would think, to any woman, to anybody who's maybe Latina, maybe, and we will talk a little bit about your time in Japan, but somebody that maybe didn't grow up here in the United States of America. Obviously, our podcast being focused pretty significantly on employment here in the U.S. and so on. So you're incredibly relatable in that sense, and so you deserve a tremendous amount of credit for that and for telling this great story of opportunities in manufacturing. You think about just the compensation opportunities for women and people really of any gender, but women for sure in manufacturing. Talk about that. What is the average salary for a woman working in manufacturing?
That is another area that I'm glad that you're bringing it up. I think currently the average woman in manufacturing makes between $63,000 and $83,000.
Wow.
It's a well-paid job. Not all the jobs are going to require you to go to college.
Right, a lot of
it
them
doesn't really
yeah.
require that expensive investment. And it's a very good salary, especially where we know that sometimes, women make about 82 cents to the dollar compared to a male. So it's a really good space for women to be able to get a good salary.
Good salary indeed, and a really, really rewarding career. And I think a lot of times, I talk to folks about careers in manufacturing, and I ran manufacturing companies for 25 years. There's just something about getting to the end of the day and looking at a sea of parts sitting on a manufacturing floor or sitting on a dock going ready to go wherever they're going and knowing that you had a part in making that. I mean, and that's so incredibly rewarding. And then the other part, I think a lot of folks, if they don't recognize or if they haven't spent a lot of time in manufacturing, they don't recognize the amazing people, the types of people from all walks of life that work in manufacturing, hardworking people that take an incredible amount of pride in their work. And so for folks considering manufacturing jobs, I mean, that is a huge part of the reason to go into manufacturing. Certainly the compensation is fantastic. And, in my home state of Wisconsin, 40-50% more than the average non-farm payroll job is what manufacturing jobs pay. And that's pretty similar as we see it across the country. And also opportunities to advance. So we think about starting in a role in manufacturing. You can start out running a piece of manufacturing equipment, and you can rise up over the course of time into positions of responsibility. Maybe historically more so men than women in the manufacturing environment. And I want to touch on that. Women make up 30% of the manufacturing workforce, as I understand it, about 25% of the leadership positions. So we're certainly making progress, but we've got some work to do. As you talk to women about careers in manufacturing, Mariana, as you see people who are advancing in the world of manufacturing, women in particular, what are some of the challenges that they face in terms of moving ahead?
It is an area that is very close to my heart. I think that you are getting into the whole concept of mentorship and sponsorship. It's not only about, recruitment, making an extra effort to make sure, in the case of Hexagon, we make sure that we have a woman in every interviewing pool. So it's important that we get them through the door, as you just mentioned.
So when you say a woman who is interviewing for a job or a woman who's on the team that's interviewing?
On both sides. We're making sure that we're covering having a candidate. Because if you think about it, a lot of the recruitment happens through, introductions. And if we have primarily males, we're going to get more males coming through the interviewing process. So we make sure that we reach out to areas where women are going to be applying for jobs. But then after that is making sure, how do we help these women to make it all the way to the top? And we're talking about mentorship, making sure that there's somebody who's been, training, sharing, past experience, but also sponsorship.
Sure.
Where you really have somebody who's going to be looking after these careers, making sure that you're going to put your reputation, on the line because you really believe that these women deserve to get another opportunity, an extra opportunity, being part of more interesting projects, being there where the promotions are going to be happening. So it's critical that companies, invest on that mentorship and sponsorship. And I had, as I mentioned before, on also visibility. When you have women in the company, how do you make sure that, we're listening to their experiences, we're sharing it with everybody, because you want to see that people like you have made it to the top and that you have that possibility.
So is this a formal program at Hexagon? Do you actually have like a formal program around and we're going to talk about mentorship and sponsorship and the differences in a moment, but around advancing women throughout the organization? Is that something that you're actively working on, or does it happen organically, or how does that come together?
It's very important at Hexagon, and as you mentioned it, very clearly, it's not just about an organic component and wishing that it's going to happen.
Right.
It's really making it into a program. So we make sure that we're partnering, we're entry level, females with females who've been longer in the industry, making sure that we have a program strong enough to support career development.
Got it. And as you're supporting that career development and as they're developing within the organization, taking on the responsibilities and increasing levels of leadership, are there specific, attributes or specific perspectives that a woman would bring to a leadership team that might be a little bit, let's just say, non-traditional in comparison to a typical male-led organization?
Absolutely. And that's why, we say that, more diverse companies are more innovative, and more innovative companies are more diverse, because there is a very different skill set that comes to the table. You're talking about much more collaboration. You're talking about much more that, different pool of ideas. Sometimes, woman can be a little bit more patient, a little bit more dedicated to an idea. So there are different characteristics that come into play.
And I've been on, frankly, for a long time. I would go all the way back to the early zeros, maybe into the 90s, and on leadership teams that I was a part of. And in fact, the first manufacturing company I worked for, the vice president of operations was a woman. And that was, pioneering time, right? I mean, that was 30, 35 years ago. And so I've been accustomed to having women on leadership teams, whether being a part of a leadership team led by a woman or being, leading a company, but having women on the team. And I would agree with that. And you never want to paint it with too broad a brush, but in terms of some of the patience and some of almost the nurturing aspects of bringing employees in, listening, those types of things. I mean, not that men can't do those things well as well, but there are definite differences. So I could see where those are some aspects and perspectives that women would bring to the discussion. You've mentioned mentorship and sponsorship, and I don't want to say interchangeably, but repeatedly through our conversation. Are those the same thing, or if not, how are they different, and why are they both important?
They are very different components. Mentorship, it's much more the art of teaching, sharing, guiding, making sure that you are sharing what, the experiences that you had in the past. You're maybe teaching about, even technology training, soft skill training. So everything is a little bit of more like a one-way conversation, if you want to call it that way. Sponsorship is when you actually take an active role on making sure that that person's career actually develops.
Okay.
It means that when that person is not maybe at the meeting and somebody is asking for a resource to be part of the project, you say, hey, I would like to make sure that such and such person actually gets, that role because A, B, C, and D. But it's where you really take an active role where you might be even using your political capital,
sure,
where you're going to be taking a risk together to make sure that that person's career really makes it to the next level versus, mentoring that is much more sharing, caring, educating.
Got it. So, the mentorship from a leadership standpoint would be, here's how you lead, here's how you do the job, here's how you handle conflict, here's how you complete an employee review, these types of things, right? So more of the tactical, and then the sponsorship is really almost becoming an advocate for that individual and
exactly,
and saying, look, I'm going to, we're going to go side by side, and I'm going to, show you the ropes. I'm going to usher you through the process of becoming a leader in this organization. Is that something you do formally? I mean, is that where you have an individual who is ripe for growth from a leadership standpoint, and you actually, how does that work? Do you assign them a sponsor? Do they choose their sponsor? How does that fit?
It is a process that has to happen a little bit naturally, because there has to be an interest from both parties. So, but it is a portion, again, as you asked me, I think in one of the questions at the very beginning, it's a portion that I see as an obligation as one of the few women, who are part of the manufacturing industry. So I make sure that, all the females in my team can have these opportunities, can have these open conversations to get them ready for when the opportunity arrives. I have been in situations where I do have to have a political fight and say, I think I remember, many years ago, we were interviewing different candidates for a senior role, 2 senior roles. And for one, we had a strong internal male candidate. And for the other one, we had a strong female candidate. On the male side, after we met the internal candidate, he was, okay, he's awesome. Let's get him the position. Fully agree. Great candidate. When it came to the female side, it was, well, she's great, but why don't we see other people from outside of the company? I'm like, is she not good enough? No, she's very good. So why is it that for the male candidate, we're giving him the role, but for the female candidate?
Sure.
And those are the conversations that as a sponsor, you have to say, okay, this is not fair. So we're going to do it in the way that it should be. So, that's something that I take a lot of pride in, being very involved with the females that are in my teams, the females that are, in this case, Hexagon, and many people that through LinkedIn I have met and they need, help with their careers.
Sure. Yeah, it's not fair and it's not good for the company either, right? I mean,
Yes.
if you've got a talented individual, both in terms of making sure that you're promoting talent within the organization, but also kind of setting that example for other individuals who may be at other levels or in other roles in the organization, that this is an organization that, regardless, if you're performing at a high level, we're going to make sure that you have opportunities and that you're not going to be, artificially constrained in terms of what your opportunity to grow in the organization. From the sponsorship side of things, how many women are you mentoring and sponsoring at any one point in time?
That's a great question. And it tends to be large numbers, not all of them directly. But, another thing that I need to make sure is that all my peers, my male peers, are also becoming, advocates. And they also have their own, sponsorship to females, because otherwise I will be, almost, like a funnel that it will get a little bit too small. So
right.
Really,
yeah, you get a constraint. Yeah.
A part is to really make sure that also, the males in the organization are also supporting. But it tends to be, definitely, larger numbers.
So that's an interesting point. So you have situations where, like, if I've got a woman who's advancing in the organization, is her sponsor always another female, or it could be a male?
No, it has to be both, because can you imagine, we were just saying, if it's only about a quarter of the roles that are, are by females, it just wouldn't.
Yeah, you'd artificially constrain it.
Exactly. So no, one of my, my obligations is to make sure that all the males that I work with can also see why is it that it's important that supporting the female talent.
Do you still get some resistance? You don't necessarily talk about your organization specifically, but is there still some artificial resistance that's built in on the part of kind of the culture within a manufacturing organization to that, or are we getting better?
It's a really good question. And I was listening to a podcast, Freakonomics. I really like it. And they were talking about the fact that it's not anymore that you're going to find a male out there who's going to say, I don't want to hire females. That's really,
right.
That does not, that doesn't really exist, right. Anymore. It's a little bit more what happens when you, who do you identify with? What are the conversations that you enjoy having? There's things of that nature that are going to make it a little bit harder for you to maybe identify with a young female who maybe doesn't want to talk about sports.
Sure. And
it's nothing that you're really doing consciously, but if you can consciously say, hey, I want to make sure that we get the best talent, I think, they're great. It's great supporting on the male side as well.
So give me a good success story. You touched on one, which was the woman who needed some advocacy when she was being considered for a role, and another individual who was a male was being considered for a role, and maybe weren't getting exactly the same type of treatment. Do you have other success stories of women who have risen in the organization? You're obviously one yourself, but do you have others?
Yes, I have many happy stories to tell from people who have followed me from other companies to Hexagon, or people, women who have left to work to other organizations, many who have joined as individual contributors, and then, nurturing them, preparing them, many times with, hard feedback, many times, pointing out what is it that has to be maybe done in a slightly different way, many times, supporting them to apply for that bigger role that they might not have done before. So yes, I do have a good number of females that I've been able to now get to director level, VP level, SVP level.
Awesome. That's got to be incredibly rewarding for you.
Absolutely. I think that by now, one of the most rewarding parts of my career, it's really helped other people to make it to the top.
Yeah, that's a great feeling, and we see the same thing in our businesses as well. I mean, I love having an organization that's being successful. I love having an organization that's winning. Obviously, having a profitable organization allows you to reinvest in your company
Yes.
and so on, and further your mission. But the most rewarding part of it is seeing people that are coming into an organization, believing in a mission, and then seeing this opportunity to improve their lives, to improve the lives of their families, to maybe do things they didn't know they were capable of doing, to find interests or skills or talents that they didn't know they had. That's just an incredibly rewarding part of getting a little bit deeper in terms of longevity in the workforce, for lack of a better term. And I've been doing this a while, and that's fantastic. So if I'm a manufacturing leader and I'm listening to what I'm hearing and I'm saying, oh, we need to do a better job at this. We need to be better about, whether it's mentoring, sponsoring, being knowledgeable and aware of the areas in which we may be holding certain individuals back unintentionally. What are some really innovative strategies that you would recommend to those individuals? Where do you start and what have you seen work really well?
I always say start with your HR department.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to make sure that you're getting female candidates into
Right.
that interviewing process.
Sure.
Make sure that there's visibility on the ones that you already have, within the organization. And as we spoke at the very beginning, make sure that you have programs that allow for the flexibility that is going to be needed for females to stay in your organization.
Got it. So making sure that we're working through the HR department. If we're trying to grow females in the organization and move them into spots of leadership, we can't do that unless they're there to begin with, right?
Exactly.
So we have to recruit them. We've got to be, aware at the HR level when we're going out and recruiting candidates for new positions, that we want to make sure that we're, that we're bringing women and people from, all walks of life into those opportunities, provided obviously that they're qualified to be interviewed for the role, to give them the best and the greatest opportunity to be considered for our companies. And then from there, it's just a question of asking the right questions, of making sure that we're open to talent from all over and recognizing the unique benefits that all types of people can bring to an organization. You lived around all types of cultures, all types of people. As we were chatting, as you mentioned, saw on my phone, actually, I had a picture of some time that I spent in Tokyo that just by coincidence was up on the phone as we were talking, as we were warming up. And you mentioned that you lived in Tokyo for a long time. Where else have you lived?
Yes, I'm born in Mexico City.
Okay.
So I grew up in Mexico City. I went to a Japanese school. I lived there until I was 18.
Wow.
And then I lived 11 years in Tokyo. Tokyo is like my second home.
Huh.
Then a couple of years in London.
Wow.
And then Boston has been home for the last 20 years.
Awesome. Yeah. So you speak Japanese as well then?
Yes.
Yeah. So Japanese and Spanish, obviously, and English. That's incredible. I've never been to Mexico City. I've been to Mexico, but usually in the manufacturing world, kind of in the Maquiladora.
Monterrey area.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, Monterrey and Juarez and so on, but never to Mexico City. Although I'm still 3 credits short of a minor in Spanish at the university. So
oh wow! So maybe next podcast we should do it in Spanish.
yeah, exactly. Well, I would tell you that that would be a lot more difficult to follow than this one would be, but I can still get by a little bit. And of course, been to Tokyo several times. Love London. Where did you live in London?
London, West London.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one of our businesses, several suppliers in the UK, so get
Oh
over there
wow!
from time to time. So those are amazing places to, and Boston too. I mean, I love Boston as well, and Boston Harbor is just absolutely beautiful. And
Everybody loves the Patriots, the Celtics, the Bruins.
Yep, exactly. Well, and I spent a week at Suffolk University a few years ago. So right near Boston Common, and boy, it's an awesome city. So you live some really cool stuff. So let's talk about that a little bit. You've got experience with Latin culture, Japanese culture, spent time in Europe. How do you see those cultural influences shaping leadership in manufacturing with all those different perspectives that you've got, Mariana?
There are different components that you get to apply because at the end of the day, the manufacturing world is so rich. You're just talking about the maquiladoras in Monterrey.
Right.
We're seeing all these, foreign companies, as we're here having this conversation at IMTS. So it's a world of diversity.
Right.
As much as we're talking about the US-centric conversation,
right.
It is a very diverse world out there. So some of the principles that I use, nemawashi. When it comes to the Japanese culture, it's a beautiful culture.
It is.
and it has many different principles like Nemawashi that allows you to convince a large group of people to follow an idea. When we were talking about diversity, inclusion, about females, collaboration, all the different components are going to require that, a lot of people follow you. So what the Japanese say is that when you're going to be moving a tree from one place to another place, you just don't pull out the tree, because if you do that, it's going to die. But if you massage the roots little by little, then you're going to be able to transfer the tree and it's going to grow even better.
That's
so the
beautiful.
same applies when you have different ideas.
You
have to, to talk to many people. You have to explain what's going to be the benefit. It seems that it's going to take a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, you're going to get much better results. So that's one of the principles that I really love from Japanese culture. And then, as you mentioned, for Mexico, Latin culture, very big into relationships, making sure that you have that partnership even before you get into business. Again, as you mentioned before, when we started the podcast today, you first you get to know each other. You get to see a little bit more of that authenticity of the person. You build a little bit of trust, and then you can go into doing, much bigger things together.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a great perspective. And as you're talking about Latin culture, I just want to ask you this, because this was something that I learned in an interesting way. So I ran a large contract manufacturing company in Wisconsin for 10 years. It was a spinoff of Rockwell Automation. We had an incredibly diverse both leadership teams. So, our leadership team, our lead chemist was from Russia. Our head of customer service was immigrated from Mexico. Our lead wastewater treatment person grew up in Ghana. So we had people literally from all over the world on that leadership team. And it wasn't even that we set out to create a real diverse leadership team. We just, frankly, we hired awesome people, regardless of where they were from. And we ended up with this incredible group of people. So that was one observation. But the other one that I was surprised by was that as Americans, we kind of tend to lump Latin culture into one group, right? And we had in that company, both in the leadership team and on the shop floor, we had people who were from Cuba, we had people from Puerto Rico, we had people from the Dominican Republic, we had people from Mexico, who in many ways, while they shared some cultures, there were a lot of differences in those cultures as well. Is that common when you're looking at the way Americans look at Latin culture, that we tend to lump them all together as cultures, whereas there are some distinct differences?
It is a very common perspective of LATAM, where you say, well, everybody, south of the border must be similar. And there's plenty in common.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yep.
There's plenty in common, but there's also a lot of differences. Even, one of the challenges that I've been trying to work through in the last couple of months is we have a very big operation both in Mexico and in Brazil.
Okay.
And there are very different cultures from a business perspective, not only the language, in this case being Spanish and Portuguese, but, Mexico being closer to the U.S., you have, many more people speak English in a different way, a little bit closer to the way that the U.S. Works, versus in this case, Brazil, that has a very different personality, works in a different way. So I think it's healthy to assume that there's a lot in common,
right?
But there's also differences.
Yeah, and we learned that, and we had an incredibly diverse workforce, and probably 60% of that company, give or take, was Latino. And I had so many great memories of working with all those wonderful people. It was just fantastic. So, and it spoke to the value of a diverse workforce. We got a lot done. We worked together. We all had a shared mission. We created opportunities for people, no matter where they were from or what walk of life. For anybody working in manufacturing now, whether you have a Mexican supply base, which a lot of companies do, whether you're employing Latin talent here in the United States, what are the things that the manufacturing needs to do, Mariana, to better embrace and leverage Hispanic talent?
And you're making an interesting point that it all starts with really getting the best talent out there. I feel like with a lot of the conversation that we're having, I'm preaching to the choir on, how do you create an environment that is going to allow you to have the best available talent? And I tend to talk about three components. First of all, listening.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make assumptions. Just listen, to your employees, listen to your vendors, listen to your partners, so that you can really understand, where people are coming from. Secondly, again, provide visibility. What is it that the organization is thinking? What are the goals? So that you can really, again, going back to the first point, you can listen to what is it that is connecting, what is it that is not connecting, And thirdly, depending on the size of the organization, create a space where people feel at home. By now, you have all these employee resource group, ERGs. One of the things that I do at Hexagon is I run something that is called Marketing en Español, so that we create a moment where people can speak in Spanish, even people who don't really have to use their Spanish on a daily basis because we hire them for a very different skill set, but creating that space that makes people feeling at home.
Sure.
Because you want, a company is like a home.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You spend 8 hours a day, 40,
Exactly.
50 hours a week there. You want it to feel comfortable. So making it feel like a home, certainly providing an environment where people can speak their native languages, where they can interact with people with maybe, similar backgrounds or similar spaces in life, what have you. What are the other things that we need to be thinking about as far as making Hispanic and Latin employees feel at home at work?
Making sure that people understand that you're valuing them for the skill set that they bring to the table.
Right.
That you're thinking about their career development as you're thinking of the career development of the rest of the organization. It's making sure that you're listening, but you're treating everybody equally with the same hopes for their own career development.
Absolutely. And, people come to us with a wide variety of capabilities, but, nobody should be limited in terms of where they can go in the organization, whether they need additional training, mentoring, sponsorship, advocacy in terms of finding opportunities for them, maybe helping them through some of the hurdles that they might run into working in a manufacturing operation, all really, really important things. Does that tie in? I know you're super, super involved with the Boys and Girls Club and the great work that's going on there. Talk a little bit about that, both from from an ethnic background standpoint, from a partnership standpoint, from, getting that next generation of talent excited about great careers.
It's a wonderful organization. I've been involved with them for about a year.
Okay.
The president is phenomenal. Robert really has a vision for making sure that we're moving away from a conversation of donation, of charity, and much more moving into getting really that next generation of workforce ready.
Mm-hmm.
Providing, for some children that, might not have access to, to certain things to ensure that they're going to be ready to make the most out of their careers, heavy investment into our workforce readiness, providing children, with internships, teenagers, with all that, again, the visibility, the empowerment to ensure that they can, all these children can go and have great careers,
right,
after they finish their, the basic studies. And that's why I love the organization with a passion.
Yeah, doing really, really important work. If I'm a young person participating in my local Boys and Girls Club, help me understand how you're engaging with them. What does that feel like? So they're going to their club meetings, they're going to the physical space that they go to, whether it's after school, weekends, summers, what have you. How is Hexagon, or how are you individually kind of engaging with those individuals?
Yeah, so kids start from a very early age, start learning to swim. It's a space where they can go after in school. And as they get older, they get into all these, workforce readiness programs where people like me, people, who work in different industries, we support them with helping them getting their resumes ready, getting the internships, ready, ensuring that they can meet with mentors, with sponsors, great collaborations with the industry, in Boston to make sure that they can get exposed to internships, again, not only in manufacturing, but also healthcare, hospitals, so that they can have a bigger perspective into what's available out there as they're graduating from high school.
And I commend you on the work you're doing. You think about these, young people that a lot of times maybe, attending their local Boys and Girls Clubs, maybe don't have all the same exposure and opportunities that other young people might have. And, we talk a lot about in manufacturing, the importance of basically pulling a diverse workforce into manufacturing. But that doesn't just happen on autopilot. And you think about, a student that grows up in the suburbs of a city like Boston, a city like Milwaukee, maybe has opportunities to go to a great school, maybe has extracurricular activities that they might not have had, depending on what part of the city they grow up in. I'll just speak to my city in Milwaukee. I mean, you grow up in a town like Germantown or Cedarburg, your opportunities are going to look different than a student that's growing up on 35th and Burleigh in the middle of the central city. And capabilities are all still there. The drive and the excitement and the commitment might all still be there. But unless we create those opportunities for young people and recognize that, that we don't change the bar, but we have to change we say raise the floor. For certain individuals, if they don't have those same chances and opportunities, we've got to create those for them. And I think manufacturing is waking up to that. They're waking up to the point of not just because there's economic benefit in recruiting an awesome workforce, but because there's just a benefit in terms of humanity of making sure we create as many opportunities as we can for people. Really, really important work as those students are in middle school and high school that we're thinking through those things. And I want to take you back to that middle school and high school age, right? So when you were 15 years old, still in Mexico City, is that where you were?
Yes, I was still in Mexico City. Yes.
Yeah. So let's think about that. So young Mariana, she's 15 years old. She's growing up in Mexico City. Who knows that she's going to be chief marketing officer for this worldwide recognized incredible organization called Hexagon. So let's turn the clock back then. And if you could give that young girl one piece of advice at 15 years old that she would have really benefited from, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say that half of the advice will be patient, be caring, be sweet to yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
And then the other half will be, yes, it's going to be hard work. And you have to work hard. And you have to work super hard. But if you combine it with that patience and love for yourself, things are going to work out fine.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And frankly, in mentoring, high school kids from time to time, we talk a lot about that, look, you don't have to look to the rest of the world to determine what your value as a human being is. Be kind to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself, especially when it comes to personality or what have you. And if you have that combination of being kind to yourself breeds self-confidence, I believe. And if you have that self-confidence and are willing to work hard and to put the time in, because none of this happens automatically. Success doesn't happen without a degree of dedication and work. It's amazing what can happen as a result of that. It's amazing what you've done, Mariana, as a result of all the hard work that you've had, of the confidence that you've built for yourself over the course of time, all the lives you're changing, all the people you're sponsoring and mentoring, this great work you're doing with the Boys and Girls Club. Really appreciate you doing all that work, getting this next generation of talent excited about careers in advanced manufacturing, and really glad that you're able to join us here on the Tech Ed Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. That's what we do here at the Tech Ed Podcast this week with Mariana and every single week. Hope you enjoyed this episode with Mariana Cogan, Chief Marketing Officer of Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence, as much as I did. Such an amazing background, incredible work that she is doing now. You'll find all that information on the show notes for this page, which you will find at techedpodcast.com/Cogan. That is techedpodcast.com/Cogan. And remember, you'll find us all over social media. Doesn't matter if you're on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, wherever it is that you're going to consume your social media and learn what's going on in the world, you will find the Tech Ed Podcast there. When you see us, when you find us, leave us a note. Let us know that you love what you're hearing on the Tech Ed Podcast. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to see you again next week. Until then, I am your host, Matt Kirchner. Thanks for being here.